is to change the face of the world, helping people, helping them change, for peace, for relief from suffering, for fuller lives. We are United Nations volunteers, UNVs.
Je me suis lancé au volontariat parce que j'avais envie de découvrir, envie de connaître et de partager ce que je connaissais déjà.
Certainly is a broadening experience to compare your own ideas with ideas of another culture.
Lo que es más importante es la sensibilidad, es el tener claro de que el voluntario tiene un compromiso humano.
It needs a lot of insights. It needs a lot of perception. It needs a lot of guts.
We're working in more than 130 countries. For instance, with people forced from their homes by war or natural disaster. Here in Tanzania, 400,000 Rwandans. This southern city mushroomed overnight. Ngara refugee camp, the world's largest. People jammed together, food in short supply, horror behind them, survival unsure. The slightest snag can turn into a riot. Midori Paxton, a UNV from Japan. She knows that she needs to keep calm. It's her second emergency relief posting. The last one was in Somalia. Here she's asked to coordinate the inputs of non-governmental relief organizations which came to the aid of the refugees.
We have to make sure everything is going well in the camp. All NGOs are fulfilling what they promised to do, and all refugees are happy about distribution and water situation, health situation and so on. When something happened, NGO call us to sort of solve problem. It's really solving problem. It's our job.
Midori and a colleague are in charge of nearly 80,000 refugees in Ngara. Right now, they also have to face the danger of a cholera epidemic. To see that everything goes well in this huge area, she has to have good relations with local and camp leaders. They appreciate Midori for her calm, her smile, her competence. They know that to her, no one is unimportant. If she overlooks even one name, a whole family can go hungry.
What I do, the small things can affect people's lives, and so if I do a good job, it can be good for them, and if I make a mistake, it could be terrible for them.
Afghanistan. In the next largest refugee camp in the world, Ethiopian UNV Genet Hailu also needs tact to work in a society dominated by men. Medical care, food aid, counselling. UNVs do many things to ensure that humanitarian aid is effective.
We'll continue. When I first came, the people were really surprised to see women working with men, especially in a warehouse, where there is a big activity and a lot of people there, especially men. And the Afghans, they believe that a woman cannot give order to a man. But luckily, I was successful. For that, they respect me. In fact, they call me Mr. Gannet.
This respect for Gannet enabled a further achievement. She has encouraged the women of the camp to set up small businesses and attend training courses to boost their self-reliance. The atmosphere is relaxed in this Mozambican military barracks. The peace accords have been signed. Time to pack. Not long to wait now for demobilization. In the 1990s, as UNVs, we've been involved on the civilian side of several United Nations peace operations. In Bosnia, Cambodia, and Haiti, for example. In northern Mozambique, where the war had been at its fiercest, demobbed soldiers have already swapped their uniforms for new clothes. The task of Rildo dos Santos, an Angolan UNV logistics man, is to launch these men to being citizens of a country at peace.
The most important for them now is that we're finished and they will have opportunity to go and see their families and go back to the place where they came from, to their villages. Is the things that make them very happy. Some of them, they don't understand why they have been all these years in bush fighting. Now that they are here in camp, they have been registered, they have got clothes, all these programs that we are doing. So they feel quite confident, you know.
Humanitarian aid brought about the trust that was vital if the soldiers were finally to hand over their weapons to the blue helmets. UNVs have no military role whatsoever. In this Mozambican demobilization, above and beyond looking after the men in the camps, we made ourselves available to counsel them after their 15 years as fighters in the bush. There was relief, yes, but also reluctance among these men, still quite young, to make this crucial gesture of confidence in the future of their country. Most of them had been living by the gun since their teens, and they still had so much to learn. One of the very first things for us was to teach them to write their own names. The 60 UNVs who served in this program were also asked to inform the veterans about the formalities of their demobilization, and we supervised distribution of the equipment being given to them. A ticket for transport, clothes, soap, a bucket, a machete, the kit for starting a new life.
For now, I'm going back to live with my family. It could be a problem to find work. If so, I'll have to go back to the land. It's too difficult to find something else.
After the demobilization, we stayed on in Mozambique to help it build a democracy. Supervising the preparation of elections is something UNVs have shown they can also do in UN operations in Cambodia, South Africa and Haiti.
I was in South Africa before here. I spent 2 months there as an electoral officer, UNV. I had a break and I came over here. The infrastructure of this country makes it a lot difficult for any operation to function as good as we would like. But, however, you know, we have coped and managed.
We've been doing a lot of mapping, especially now just before the elections, and setting up post sites, and basically organising things, logistics for international observers that come in. It's challenging working in an international environment like this.
Antline Victor.
It was a complex task to prepare for the arrival of these official observers from all regions of the world who came for a few days to observe the actual elections. There was groundwork to be done. Monitoring meetings, for instance, where local branches of the various political parties had to agree on procedures, having been sworn enemies for years past. Most of the international observers were bound for pretty remote polling stations. We had to ensure that the voting would take place under the best possible conditions.
Onde nós pretendemos ser o porta-voz da defesa da paz no nosso país.
Our objective is to speak in favor of peace in the country. We don't want war anymore.
because women, as mothers, spouses, are the ones who suffer most from it. We're going to be a pressure group to make sure that in future politicians don't repeat the mistakes of the past.
Não queremos mais guerra neste país.
In Guatemala, massacres, disappearances and sabotage have been denounced for years, attributed to the armed forces or to the opposition guerrillas. More than 100 UNVs are working with MINUGUA, the United Nations mission to verify compliance with national and international human rights norms. Recruited mainly as lawyers, we investigate alleged violations, promote trust and inform people about their rights. Livia Fejo from Peru is one of our UNVs with MINUGUA.
Las reuniones también no solamente se hacen con la finalidad de que ustedes conozcan la misión MINUGUA.
The purpose of these meetings is not only to make you more familiar with MINUGUA's aims, but to get from you an idea of how things are going in your villages. It's all part of why we are here. One right which is very important is the right to meet freely and set up associations. Meeting us, for instance, is a right, a freedom to which you are entitled.
In some villages in Guatemala, 80% of the women are widowed. The UNVs go out to discuss with them the evidence for their husband's disappearance. In one village Livia visits, she's shown a mass grave hidden in a thicket. Patience and careful listening are required to gain the confidence of women who have suffered so much, who live in fear and have little faith that justice will be done. The UNV program began in 1971. From the beginning, to be selected as a UNV has required professional qualifications and several years' prior working experience. This is essential to our one overriding aim, helping people escape their poverty and develop in ways that can be sustained. In this work, we partner most agencies of the United Nations system. Paradox of nature, the Cape Verde Islands, in the Atlantic but virtually without water. Here, every drop of rain is precious. Water has to be carried great distances. It's drawn from deep wells. They have to build storage tanks. The Cape Verdeans are used to it. UNV Yaya Konate, an agronomist from Mali, knows desert when he sees it. He admires the courage of the Cape Verdeans. But is it easy to come as a stranger to someone else's desert and work with the people?
If you approach them honestly, not arrogantly, if you're interested in their problems, there's no reason why not. They're much more open-minded than you might think. All I know is that I love these people.
People's needs and the techniques they find relevant. These are our guiding principles. In our jargon, we practice the participatory approach. We try to facilitate the ideas and solutions which people themselves decide upon.
It's a new approach for here, agreed directly with the people. They themselves felt it would work better if those to benefit were to participate fully. Amongst other things, it ensures the work is done well.
No one prescribes from outside anymore, top down. People have the say in what are their own initiatives. Just flooding a field wastes water. Instead, Yaya uses the participatory approach to suggest techniques like drop-by-drop irrigation. Quite enough water to grow beautiful cabbages. The innovation catches on.
Thanks to Yaya, the engineer working with us here, people are learning new things and understanding them. They are proud to put this new knowledge into practice and to share it with others in the village.
Every year, Cape Verdeans dig tens of thousands of holes in the dry but fertile earth to recreate the lost forests, to make Cape Verde verdant again. It can serve as a reminder for us UNVs. To fight a desert or eradicate poverty, you have to have courage and patience. On Nossi Bay Island, off the north of Madagascar, nature is generous. Food is plentiful. But there isn't enough employment to fill the vacuum of poverty. For many women, some of them quite young, prostitution seems the only way of getting some money, to have the things they want to buy. Lydia Vedig is a UNV nurse with a fight on her hands too. She's joined the Malagasy government's battle against AIDS, particularly amongst prostitutes. As well as informing these women about sexually transmitted disease and how to protect themselves, Lydia promotes small income-earning schemes for those of them who want a way out of their predicament. Lydia is French. One UNV in 4 comes from an industrialized country. Does being a UNV require a big change in lifestyle compared with Western standards?
The standard of living is average, especially if you come with your children. The living conditions can be difficult when it comes to their education or the personal transport provided to UNVs.
We have adequate transport for the job, and UNVs accompanied by their families receive additional allowances. Even with that, a UNV assignment costs the international community between a quarter and a third of comparable technical assistance. UNVs accept a modest lifestyle and don't expect to live on a grand scale or to make many savings during what is normally a 2-year contract.
The conclusion is that my contract is almost up, and I'm very keen to see it renewed in order to continue the activities I've begun.
Hassan Nehedi is also working in Madagascar. A forester from Tunisia, he's one of the 75% of UNVs who themselves come from developing countries. As do all of us, he gets a monthly allowance based on the cost of living in the host country.
I'm okay. I don't live the way others do. I don't have my lunch in a hotel. I don't go much to the city. I spend my time in the countryside with the farmers.
For Hassan, contact with the people he serves is compensation enough. With his 3-year-old daughter and his wife, he's often invited at weekends to join in traditional celebrations with his Malagasy friends, a privilege that other strangers are seldom given. UNV gives special priority to the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged, those whom society doesn't protect sufficiently. Women, young unemployed people, and the disabled, like this little girl, deaf, mute and blind. Nabila Habashi was an Egyptian UNV psychologist in Oman who worked with the disabled. She'd lost her left arm in an accident, so she could be particularly sensitive to mental or physical disablement in promoting new ideas for the education of these children. She helped mothers understand better what they could do to help them. So we UNVs often have a training role, whether the aim is medical care, restoring the environment, or boosting the economy. But the technical side to development is far from the only one. The United Nations Volunteers Programme has specialized for years in development at the grassroots, More and more, we're supporting and helping network the achievements of informal village groups or city neighbourhoods. The initiatives usually come from local community-based organisations or national non-governmental bodies. Joy Navarro, a UNV from the Philippines, and her local colleague Kamala, a social worker with an NGO, work together to bring solidarity and self-confidence to village women in Sri Lanka. Joy is a foreigner, but she's from Asia. That's the formula for this kind of participatory development program which UNV pioneered. Some UNVs are recruited in a country neighbouring the host community. They're foreign, but not too foreign.
They thought that I'll be bringing in money and buildings and all those big projects. So I have to explain to them that I did not bring anything and that I have to look into their problems and needs and that we have to solve it together. They were a little bit disappointed. But it's the first time that a volunteer come to this place and especially to their house. So they were a bit honored and glad to see me, so they want me to show the best they can.
When Joy leaves after 2 years, Kamala will carry on the activities they've worked up together. But with a difference, in the minds of the village women. Development has begun from bottom up. The women themselves decided their priority was a daycare centre for their children. That gave them the time to grow vegetables or work at the local coconut fibre factory. Incomes rose and the life of the village began to change. Joy's legacy was the women's self-confidence. Development begins at the grassroots and is many-faceted. Agriculture is linked to health, health to education, education to earning. They need an integrated approach in which the community takes the lead. This is the cornerstone of UNV's policy in rural areas and in cities. The capital of Nicaragua. Hundreds of children work in the streets to feed their families. They live in part of Managua destroyed by an earthquake. Many of them take drugs. Their living conditions are unhealthy. They don't go to school. Violence is a kind of release for them. Liliana Gomez is a teacher specialized in social issues. A Belgian UNV of Argentinian background, she's totally taken up with the plight of these children.
Most of the children have identity problems, in particular those who have lost the points of reference which would help them know who they are. Our job as educators is to provide them ways of discovering their identity and self-respect as children who work. That in turn will lead them to find alternatives to the situation in which they are. Our role is not to provide them with the actual alternatives. They need to discover them by themselves. Their situation is very bad, but there are always solutions.
Liliana explores alternatives with the children. She talks with them in confidence to help them give expression to their difficulties. One solution was to set up an informal school right in the centre of this forgotten neighbourhood. Courses are taught by teachers from the neighbourhood itself, like this 15-year-old girl.
What
we're doing, in effect, is to encourage initiatives by the people themselves. The community produces the response which the state is failing to give for the education of these children. It seems to me that this is the essence of volunteerism. The people who are born, grow up, and live in a community know everything about what the community needs. It's that which makes them work voluntarily for the children.
Voluntariamente a trabajar por los niños.
Local volunteers are inspired by Liliana, the UN volunteer. And her program is in turn part of a whole Central American network of voluntary organizations fighting for the rights, dignity and future of working street children. From the needs of a child to those of a community, from humanitarian relief through to sustainable human development. Each year, we're about 4,000 United Nations volunteers, and we're helping change the face of the world.